Hi everybody, it's Kelly from Let's Get Clacking, and in today's video, this is going to be another business type tutorial on how to say no to your customers. With the global pandemic hitting everybody so hard, I think it's something that's very difficult for a lot of people to do, is to know when to say no. Very often you'll find people are saying yes to jobs because they need to earn that extra 10 Rand or 50 Rand or 100 Rand, but at the end of the day, they probably end up losing money on those jobs. There are a couple of things that we really should consider when a client approaches us about a job. I'm going to try and cover as many of them as possible in this video. The first and most important aspect of learning when to say no to customers' requests is profitability. When taking on a job for a customer, it is incredibly important that we all make sure that we know exactly how profitable this job is going to be. We've worked out what the materials are going to cost us, what the time is going to cost us, the electricity, the use on our machines, those kinds of things. Very often I see people taking on jobs where they have to make 50 invitations that are super intricate cuts, like, wedding invitation type things. I'll put a picture on the screen of the kind of example that I mean, but then they don't realize that when it comes to cutting 50 of those invitations, you're going to be going through 3 different blades. You're going to have to use a new cutting mat. And all of those kinds of things obviously cost money. Blades are expensive. Cutting mats are expensive. And then if you're charging a client 10 Rand in invites for 50 invites as an example, you're going to be running that job at a loss because you have to replace your cutting mats. Maybe you have to replace your blade, like I said, maybe once or twice, because cutting through cardstock really dulls your blade very quickly. And people very often don't think about those things when they're doing a job like this. Maybe you're new into the craft. Maybe you've never done this kind of a job before. And that kind of leads me into my second point, which is skill level. Very often we have clients that approach us that have great ideas. I mean, the number of times that I've, been approached by someone and they say, "Oh, I've got this amazing idea and I really want to do this, and I want to have this done, and this is the project that I have in mind." And I get far too caught up in the excitement of, doing something new, learning something new, trying something new, that very often you don't realize just how much of a task this job is going to become. Doing new things means that you're going to stuff up. You're going to make mistakes. And mistakes can be costly. When it comes to using a new fabric, what happens if you're trying to sublimate onto a different fabric that you're almost sure that will work, but then what happens if you burn the fabric? You burn the t-shirt. What if the t-shirt cost 100 Rand? And if you were only making 50 Rand profit off the deal, then you would have completely shot yourself in the foot and you'll be losing money on that deal. Yes, you would be learning something, but at the end of the day, that kind of thing doesn't necessarily pay the bills. So you need to make sure that you are confident, that you've done the tests, that you're not going to be running at a loss on these kinds of jobs just because you want to try something new. Don't get me wrong, trying new things is very, very important when it comes to businesses, because very often what will happen is people may not want something that everybody is doing. If everybody is just putting words on a t-shirt, maybe they want foil on a t-shirt, and obviously there are foil heat transfers available. But if you say yes to a client for foil heat transfers, you're going to have to realize that, especially here in South Africa, those kinds of things aren't readily available. You might have to buy them off Amazon. You might have to source them from a shop that you wouldn't normally have done. And that will then incur extra costs. Maybe not so much for, my viewers not in South Africa, but in South Africa, our shipping costs are generally quite expensive. And when you're doing one deal on a new fabric that you have to source from one supplier, you would have to make sure that what you're charging the client includes the courier for that fabric, all of the heat transfer material. You have to make sure that you are doing those kinds of things in order to remain profitable. And that if you receive this item and it doesn't work because you haven't tested it before, because it's new, what are you going to do then? So there's a lot of research and things like that that would need to happen before you try something new like that for a client, or you would have to make sure that the client is very understanding that potentially it wouldn't work. The third thing that we really need to take into account is time. Time is probably one of the most difficult things that people tend to charge for. I see it very often where people get these outrageous requests from clients or extremely tiny requests from clients, and they don't necessarily realize how much time it's actually going to take them to complete. As an example, if a client requests one 5x5 sticker, You can't charge them 100 Rand for the sticker, but that sticker is probably going to take you 20 minutes to create. Yes, it's only a couple of rands worth of vinyl. I mean, probably maximum 5 rands worth of vinyl, but the client doesn't necessarily realize that, number one, you've got to talk to the client. Number two, you've got to load the design, cut the design, weed the design, package the design, hand it over to the client. So they wouldn't want to pay 50 Rand or 100 Rand for something like that because they don't understand the time that goes into making these kinds of things. When it comes to those kinds of requests, a recommended approach that I would suggest is to have a minimum order quantity. If you have clients requesting 5x5 stickers, you can say, no problem, I'm happy to help you. However, you need to order at least 10 of them to make it worth your while. And on the opposite scale of time is where an order will take you too long. If you have a client that is requesting an incredibly detailed mandala, and you know that these kinds of designs are going to take you an hour to an hour and a half to weed, you need to make sure that you're keeping that in mind when you're quoting the client, and that you're not just quoting them on the actual vinyl, how much the vinyl is going to cost you, because then you will end up essentially working for free. And unfortunately, free doesn't pay the bills. And that is kind of overlapped with the fourth thing, which is complexity. If you have jobs that are extremely complex, you need to make sure that you're accounting for that in your quotation. Not only when it comes to weeding vinyl, but also when it comes to, if you have t-shirt orders, but you need to layer 5 or 6 different types of vinyl, that is quite a complex order. And you need to make sure that, number one, that you're charging correctly for your time, the materials, and also the added complexity factor, what we like to call the stuff up factor. Now, there's generally another word that I use, but I'm not going to use that today, which perfectly leads me into the fifth point, and that is how much room there is for failure. When it comes to those kinds of, multi-layering designs, the room for failure is significantly high. If you know for a fact that the client won't like it if there's a 0.5 millimeter gap between the one color and the other color, and you press it and something moves on the fabric and there is a 0.5 millimeter gap, you need to keep that into account when it comes to giving the client a quotation, because you need to make sure that even if you do mess up on one of the t-shirts, heaven forbid 2 of the t-shirts, that you wouldn't be running at a loss. So those are the kinds of things that you need to then keep into account when you're giving the client a quote. If you're not quite sure how to work out your prices, I'll link at the top a video that I've done recently on how to calculate your cost. And in that video, I also provide a free template that you can download that will help you work what to charge the client. Now, the last section of this video is going to be something that will help you to turn a no into a yes in a different way. So how you would say no to a client without actually saying no. When it comes to saying no to a client, very often we don't want to say no because most people aren't in a position where I'm in, where I have a full-time job. YouTube is not my full-time job yet. Shock, shock, horror, horror, I know. But we aren't always in a position where we have that to fall back on and we use it to supplement our income. For a lot of you watching, this is probably your main income and you can't afford to say no to a client. You need the business. Because of that reason, we tend to say no out of desperation more than anything else. And when it comes to saying no, you know that perhaps that means the difference between you being able to feed your family for that evening. And that is heartbreaking, but I want to help you to learn to say maybe not necessarily no, but learn to tell the client, look, this is not profitable for me, or I could do this, but unfortunately I would be running at a loss. And one of those methods is saying no without actually saying no. So what you would do in this kind of a situation is, instead of saying, no, I can't do that, you would say, I would be able to do that. However, what I would need to do is blah, blah, blah. Or I would be able to do this. However, please be advised that the price of this material is significantly higher than the normal standard heat transfer vinyl, as an example. Or you can simply say, unfortunately, that's not something that my business offers. Very often we want to say to, if a client approaches us and they say, I'd like this screen printed. And you can say, well, I don't actually do screen printing, but I can do heat transfer vinyl, which is almost the same thing. Something else that you can consider is negotiating with the client, maybe managing the client's expectations. If they want you to do 100 vinyl designs, maybe they're relatively small designs and it requires a lot of time and effort, instead of doing those through vinyl, what you would be able to do is maybe offer them a print and cut solution. So you can say, okay, I understand your application that you want. However, this is going to turn into a very expensive product because it takes a long time to cut and to weed and to process. However, I can offer you a cheaper alternative, which is maybe a print and cut on clear sticker paper, which will give you a similar effect, similar desired effect, but it'll be significantly cheaper. So instead of saying no to the client, you can provide them with alternatives that maybe would be slightly, maybe not exactly what they want. They would then be able to decide, okay, I can go for the more expensive product, which is exactly what I want, or I can go for the cheaper product, which is not exactly what I want, but at a fraction of the cost. Because at the end of the day, the client is seeing you as the expert in the field, and you would be able to better advise them on an alternative. So for example, if they just want a sticker for their car, they may not realize that, like I keep harping on the weeding idea, that there's that much work involved with going through something like that. Maybe you're able to have access to an eco-solvent printer, because obviously that would work best with an outside sticker application, and it would be a fraction of the cost. It would have almost exactly the same look, but you wouldn't have to necessarily worry about it taking that much time, and you can charge the client a much lower price, and you'll be able to get onto the next order faster. Another important aspect of learning to say no is to know when to redirect your order to someone else. We would always want to be able to do every order ourselves, but we all know what areas are our expertise and what is not our expertise. As an example, if you have a sticker business and you predominantly do vinyl stickers, print and cut stickers, product labels, those kinds of things, and somebody approaches you for a mug, maybe you have a sublimation printer, maybe you don't. You probably would be able to do the order, but it may be slightly too complex or maybe slightly too daunting for you to be able to do. Instead of saying yes all the time, we need to learn when to rather refer it to somebody who will be able to help them. And that's where it's good to make friends within the craft business so that we're able to actually pass on the business to somebody else who can very easily handle an order of 100 mugs, as they are more geared up for that kind of setup than what we would be able to do, as much as we would want to learn new skills all the time. So I really hope that this video has helped you. If you have any other examples that you would like me to cover of, saying no to customers, or some certain situations that maybe you've experienced that you would like some advice on or some help with, I'm happy to look into it. I do quite a bit of research when it comes to these videos, just to make sure that I'm looking at everything and being able to give you a much more inclusive answer, and I'm not just speaking from my experience, as I know that my experience is not necessarily what your experience has been. So I'd really love to hear from you guys, to hear what experiences you've had, what clients you've had to deal with. If you have problems dealing with a particular client, let me know. Maybe I can help you with that. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment to let me know what was your most difficult client or order that you've ever had to deal with. I'd love to hear your stories. If you want to subscribe to my channel for more business help in the future, I'm definitely going to be creating more of these kinds of videos. I have a long list of topics that I'd like to cover once every so often to help you improve your business and provide better services to your customers. So you can subscribe to my channel on this side. On that side will be my latest video, and just below it will be something that YouTube thinks that you'll enjoy. I will see you next time, everybody. And remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon.